The little boy in green overalls looked exactly like my son. Same dark curls bouncing as he ran, same bright smile that could light up any room. But my son had been gone for 30 years. I stood frozen at that neighborhood barbecue, watching this child who could not possibly exist, wearing clothes identical to what my triplets had worn the morning they disappeared. My heart hammered against my ribs as impossible thoughts flooded my mind. The rational part of me knew this was just another cruel trick of grief, the kind that had tortured me for 3 decades. But something deeper, something maternal and fierce, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this time was different. Welcome to my channel, where I share real stories with unexpected twists. If you like what you hear, please hit subscribe and give me a thumbs up. It really means a lot to me. Now, let's begin this story. My name is Ruby Coleman, and I am the mother of 3 sons who vanished without a trace on June 12, 1981. Blake, Carter, and Felix were 6 years old, identical triplets with matching dimples and an unbreakable bond. One moment they were building a fort in our front yard in Austin, Texas. The next moment, they were gone. For 30 years, I have carried their absence like stones in my chest. Every birthday that passed unmarked, every Christmas morning without their laughter, every mother I saw holding her grown son's hand at graduation ceremonies I would never attend. Wesley, my husband, learned to live alongside my grief. He understood that our house had become a shrine, with their bedroom preserved exactly as they left it, down to the Lego castle half-built on Carter's desk. That Saturday in June 2011 felt like any other day in our quiet neighborhood. The Rodriguez family was celebrating their 8-year-old son Tommy's birthday, and the whole block had been invited. Wesley and I brought homemade brownies and forced smiles, the way we had learned to do at community gatherings. These events were necessary but painful, watching other families celebrate milestones our boys would never reach. I stood near the garden fence, adjusting my sun hat against the Texas heat, half listening to our neighbor Martha discuss her tomato plants. The familiar sounds of childhood filled the air: laughter, running feet, the squeak of swing sets. Then I saw him. A man I did not recognize stepped through the patio door, holding the hand of a young boy. The child wore green checkered overalls with bright yellow straps, exactly like the ones my boys had worn in their last photograph. My breath caught in my throat. The resemblance was impossible, yet undeniable. Before I could stop myself, I walked toward him. My hand reached out, trembling, and touched his shoulder. "Where did you get those clothes?" I whispered. The boy's eyes went wide with fear. He pulled away and ran to his father, crying out in panic. The man looked up, alarmed, stepping protectively in front of his son. "What is going on here?" he demanded. Wesley appeared at my side, sensing trouble. He took one look at the boy's outfit, and his face went pale. Those overalls were not just similar to what our sons had worn. They were identical. Same vintage green fabric, same wide checkered pattern, same distinctive yellow straps. "Our sons wore outfits exactly like that," Wesley said quietly. "They disappeared 30 years ago." The crowd had grown quiet, neighbors turning to listen. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "The Coleman boys were taken from this very neighborhood. It devastated all of us." The father's anger dissolved into sympathy. "I am so sorry. I had no idea. I bought these at a thrift store months ago. But I could not let it go. Something about seeing those clothes on a living, breathing child had unlocked a door I had kept sealed for decades. That evening, Wesley and I sat in our living room, surrounded by boxes of evidence I had collected over the years. Police reports, witness statements, photographs, and newspaper clippings filled every surface. "Ruby, that little boy is not our son," Wesley said gently, watching me sort through files with obsessive precision. "I know that," I replied, pulling out the photo album I had not opened in years. But seeing those overalls, it reminded me that somewhere out there, 3 men are living their lives without knowing who they really are. I opened the album to the last picture ever taken of Blake, Carter, and Felix, 3 identical boys grinning at the camera, arms linked, wearing their favorite green overalls. They looked invincible, ready to conquer the world with their boundless energy and shared secrets. Wesley leaned closer, studying the image. "This was taken the morning they disappeared." "1 hour before," I confirmed, my finger tracing their faces. "Look at the background." Behind the boys, barely visible in the corner of the frame, was the front end of a distinctive car. Deep red paint, chrome bumper, the unmistakable silhouette of a 1976 Cadillac Eldorado. "That is Mr. Harper's car," Wesley said slowly. "Preston Harper, their teacher." I nodded, feeling the familiar chill that came with this particular detail. "The same teacher who left town the day before this photo was taken. At least, that is what everyone believed." Preston Harper had been beloved by parents and students alike. Kind, patient, always willing to help struggling children after school. The community had thrown him a farewell party, celebrating his transfer to a new district. But the timing had never sat right with me. Why would his car be parked on our street if he had already left town? For 3 decades, I had shared this detail with every detective, every private investigator, every cold case specialist who would listen. They all gave me the same response. Insufficient evidence. Too many years had passed. Probably just a coincidence. But mothers do not believe in coincidences when it comes to their children. Sometimes the most ordinary days hide the most extraordinary revelations waiting to unfold. The next morning, I did something I had not done in 20 years. I called in sick to my job at the county clerk's office and drove to the Austin Public Library. My hands shook as I signed up for computer time, determined to use every digital tool available to investigate what the police had dismissed for decades. I started with social media, searching for Preston Harper in every possible combination. Preston Harper teacher, Preston Harper Austin, Preston Harper Texas. Nothing. Then I tried property records, voter registrations, anything that might show where he had gone after supposedly leaving our town in 1981. What I found made my blood run cold. There was no record of Preston Harper transferring to another school district, no forwarding address, no trace of him in any Texas educational database after June 1981. It was as if he had simply vanished, just like my boys. My phone buzzed with a text from Wesley. "Ruby, please come home. We need to talk." I ignored it and kept searching. Hours passed as I dug deeper into archived newspapers, old real estate transactions, anything that might provide a clue. Then, buried in a 1983 news article about rural property developments, I found it. "Local teacher establishes youth ranch," read the headline. The article described how Preston Harper had purchased a remote property outside San Antonio to create a haven for displaced and troubled boys. The accompanying photo showed a modest farmhouse surrounded by fields, with Preston standing next to that same red Cadillac. My heart pounded as I read the details. The ranch, called Harper's Haven, was described as a place where boys without families could learn agricultural skills and receive homeschooling. The article mentioned that Preston had been inspired by his work with 3 special brothers who had needed a safe place to heal from trauma. 3 brothers, my boys. I printed everything and drove home in a daze. Wesley was waiting in the kitchen, his face creased with worry. "Ruby, you missed your doctor's appointment. You have not eaten anything today. This obsession is destroying you." I spread the printouts across our kitchen table. "Wesley, look at this. Preston Harper did not transfer to another school. He bought a ranch and started taking in boys. 3 brothers, Wesley. 3. He studied the documents, his expression growing more troubled with each page. "This does not prove anything. Even if he did take in 3 boys, that does not mean they were ours." "Then explain the timing," I said, my voice rising. "Explain why his car was in our neighborhood the morning our sons disappeared. Explain why he lied about transferring to another district." Wesley sat down heavily, running his hands through his graying hair. "Ruby, even if you are right, what are you planning to do? Drive out to some ranch and demand answers? Those boys, if they are our sons, are 36 years old now. They have lives, maybe families of their own. They might not even remember us." The thought hit me like a physical blow. My babies, now grown men, who might not recognize their own mother's face, men who had been taught to call another man father, who had lived their entire adult lives believing a lie. But then I thought about that little boy in the green overalls, and something fierce and protective rose up in me. "They deserve to know the truth," I said. "Whatever Preston Harper told them about us, whatever lies he used to steal them away, they deserve to know that we never stopped looking, that we never stopped loving them." I grabbed my purse and keys, but Wesley caught my arm. "If you are going to do this, you are not going alone," he said quietly. "But first, we call the police. We show them what you found." Detective Maria Santos had been assigned to our cold case 5 years earlier. She was younger than the other detectives, with sharp eyes and a reputation for not giving up easily. When we arrived at the station with our evidence, she listened intently, taking notes as I explained about the car in the photograph and the mysterious ranch. "Mrs. Coleman," she said finally, "this is compelling circumstantial evidence, but we need to be careful here. If Harper is still alive, if he does have 3 men living with him who might be your sons, approaching this wrong could be dangerous for everyone involved." "So, what do we do?" Wesley asked. "We investigate, quietly first. Let me run some checks on this property, see if it still exists, if Harper is still there. Meanwhile, I need you both to promise me you will not go there alone." I wanted to promise, but the words stuck in my throat. Every day that passed was another day my sons lived without knowing who they really were. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Wesley's steady breathing beside me. In the darkness, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to Harper's Haven, with or without police backup. I had waited 30 years for answers. I could not wait another day. At 4 in the morning, I slipped out of bed and wrote Wesley a note. Gone to find our boys. If something happens to me, know that I love you, but I cannot live another day without knowing the truth. The drive to San Antonio took 3 hours, the sun rising over endless Texas fields as I followed the directions I had memorized from the old newspaper article. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white, my mind racing between hope and terror. What if Preston Harper was dangerous? What if my sons had been brainwashed so completely they would not believe me? What if I was wrong about everything, and I was about to destroy the life of an innocent man? But as I turned down a dirt road marked with a weathered sign reading Harper's Haven, I knew there was no turning back. 3 decades of grief and hope had led me to this moment. In the distance, I could see buildings, a main house, several outbuildings, and parked in front of the house, still gleaming despite its age, was a red Cadillac Eldorado. Truth has a way of demanding our attention when we least expect to find it. I parked behind a cluster of oak trees, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure it could be heard across the property. Through my windshield, I watched the ranch come to life in the early morning light. Men emerged from the outbuildings, beginning their daily routines. From this distance, I could not make out faces clearly, but something about their movements, their build, sent electricity through my veins. My phone had been buzzing non-stop since I left home. Wesley, Detective Santos, missed calls stacking up like accusations. I turned it off and stepped out of the car. The sound of my car door closing echoed across the quiet ranch. Several figures looked in my direction, and one began walking toward me. As he got closer, my breath caught. Dark hair now receding slightly, strong shoulders, the same confident stride that Blake had shown even as a 6-year-old. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, his voice polite but wary. "We do not usually get visitors out here." I stared at his face, memorizing every line, every feature. He was older, weathered by years of outdoor work, but those eyes, those were Blake's eyes, the same deep brown I had kissed goodnight for 6 precious years. "I am looking for Preston Harper," I managed to say. "Mr. Harper is in the main house. Is he expecting you?" Before I could answer, 2 other men appeared, one tall and lean, the other shorter but broader through the shoulders. Carter and Felix, my sons, standing 20 feet away from me, looking at me like I was a stranger. "Blake," I whispered, the name escaping before I could stop it. All 3 men froze. The one I had been speaking to, Blake, took a step back, his face suddenly pale. "How do you know that name?" he asked sharply. "Nobody calls me that anymore." "Because that is your name," I said, tears streaming down my face. "Blake Coleman. And you are Carter. And you are Felix. You are my sons." The shorter man, Felix, shook his head violently. "Lady, you are confused. Our names are Jake, Mike, and Tommy Harper. We have lived here our whole lives with our father." "Your father lied to you," I said, my voice growing stronger despite my tears. "Preston Harper is not your father. He took you from our front yard 30 years ago. You were 6 years old, and you were wearing green overalls with yellow straps." Carter stepped forward, his face a mask of anger and confusion. "You need to leave, now, before Dad comes out here." "I have proof," I said desperately, pulling out the photograph I had carried for 3 decades. This is you, all 3 of you, taken 1 hour before you disappeared. Jake, snatched the photo from my hands. His brothers crowded around him, and I watched their faces change as they stared at the image. The resemblance was undeniable, even across 30 years. "This could be anyone," Felix whispered, but his voice shook. "Look at the background," I pressed. "That red Cadillac. It is the same car sitting in your driveway right now." "What is going on here?" The voice came from behind them, cold and commanding. Preston Harper stood on the porch of the main house, looking older but unmistakably the same man who had taught my sons about reading and arithmetic and trust. His silver hair was neatly combed, his clothes clean and pressed, but there was something predatory in his eyes that I had never seen before. "Dad, this woman says she is our mother," Carter said, his voice breaking on the last word. Preston's face remained calm, but I saw his hands clench into fists. "Boys, go inside, now." "No," I said, stepping forward. "Preston, they deserve to know the truth. You cannot keep lying to them forever." "I saved them," he said, his voice rising. "I gave them a home when no one else wanted them. I taught them skills, gave them purpose. What did you ever do for them, except lose them?" The cruelty of his words hit me like a physical blow, but I forced myself to stand straighter. I loved them. I searched for them every single day for 30 years. I never gave up, never stopped believing they were alive. Blake was still staring at the photograph, his face cycling through emotions I could not read. "This woman in the picture," he said slowly. "She has your eyes, Mom." The word hung in the air like a prayer. Mom. Not Dad's fabricated story about their birth mother dying in an accident. Mom. Preston stepped off the porch, moving toward us with deliberate steps. "Those people abandoned you, left you in a park like unwanted dogs. I found you crying, scared, alone." "That is a lie," I said, my voice steady now despite my racing heart. "We never left you anywhere. You took them from our front yard while Wesley and I were inside our house. The police have been looking for you for 30 years. "The police?" Preston's composure finally cracked. "You brought the police here?" "Not yet," I admitted, "but they know where I am. They know about this place, about what you did." Felix, Tommy, was crying now, the photograph shaking in his hands. "Dad, is it true? Did you really take us?" Preston's face contorted with rage and desperation. "I protected you. Do you think those people would have given you the life you have here? The skills, the purpose, the discipline you needed?" "The discipline?" Carter's voice was hollow. "You mean the beatings when we asked too many questions about our past? The isolation when we tried to remember things from before?" My heart shattered. They did remember, somewhere deep inside. They had always known something was wrong. Preston moved toward his car, and I realized with horror that he was planning to run. 30 years of lies were unraveling, and he would rather abandon my sons again than face the consequences. "You are not going anywhere," Blake said, and I heard the steel in his voice that I remembered from his stubborn 6-year-old declarations. He stepped in front of the Cadillac, his brothers flanking him. "Get out of my way," Preston snarled. "After everything I have done for you, ungrateful, everything you stole from us, Carter interrupted. 30 years with our real parents, birthdays, holidays, graduations. You stole our entire lives." Preston raised his hand as if to strike Carter, the same gesture that had probably silenced questions and rebellion for decades. But Carter was no longer a frightened child. He caught Preston's wrist, his grip firm and unforgiving. "Those days are over," he said quietly. In the distance, I heard the sound of sirens. Wesley had found my note, called Detective Santos, and somehow tracked me down. Relief flooded through me, but not because rescue was coming, because my sons, my brave, strong sons, had already rescued themselves. As police cars turned into the ranch driveway, Blake walked over to me. Up close, I could see tears in his eyes, the same tears that had fallen when he scraped his knee at age 4. "Mom," he said, and the word was both a question and a recognition that reached across 30 years of separation. I opened my arms, and for the first time since 1981, I held my son. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what was always meant to be yours. 6 months later, I sat in my kitchen watching Blake. He had chosen to keep the name Jake professionally, but asked us to call him Blake, flip pancakes while his brothers argued good-naturedly about whose turn it was to walk the dog. The sounds of my sons' voices filled our home for the first time in 30 years. A symphony I had never thought I would hear again. The transition had not been easy. Decades of manipulation and false memories do not disappear overnight. There were therapy sessions, difficult conversations, and moments when the weight of lost time threatened to crush us all. But love, I learned, has a remarkable ability to bridge even the widest gaps. Blake set a plate in front of me, the pancakes shaped like slightly lopsided hearts, the way I used to make them when they were little. "I remembered this morning," he said quietly. "You always made them heart-shaped on Sundays. You hated it when they were not perfectly symmetrical," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. Carter looked up from his coffee. "I still do. Some things never change." Felix laughed, and the sound was pure magic. "Remember how we used to line them up by size before eating them? Jake thought it was a rule." These moments of recovered memory came like gifts, precious fragments of their childhood emerging from the shadows where Preston Harper had tried to bury them. Not everything came back. Trauma has its own timeline for healing, but enough returned to rebuild the foundation of who they were. Detective Santos had been true to her word. Harper was now serving multiple life sentences for kidnapping, child abuse, and fraud. The investigation had uncovered 2 other children he had taken over the years, both of whom were reunited with their families. The ranch was sold, the proceeds divided among his victims for therapy and rehabilitation. Wesley appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas, hair sticking up at odd angles. Retirement suited him, especially now that our house was full of the chaos he had never expected to experience again. "Morning meeting of the Coleman Construction Company," he announced, using the name they had given their new business venture. "First project starts Monday." My sons had decided to work together, using the skills Harper had ironically taught them in carpentry and farming to build something positive. They were renovating homes for families of missing children, donating their labor to help people who understood the financial strain of never giving up hope. "About that," Felix said, producing a manila folder, "we got another request yesterday. A mother in Dallas whose daughter disappeared 2 years ago. She cannot afford to fix the roof, and winter is coming. Blake nodded. We can be there by Tuesday if we finish the Henderson job on time. I watched them plan and organize, their natural leadership dynamics the same as when they built Lego castles as children. Blake still took charge, Carter provided practical solutions, and Felix served as the emotional compass of the group. Some things, it seemed, were too fundamental to be erased. I have news too, I said, pulling out a letter that had arrived that morning. The National Center for Missing Children wants us to speak at their annual conference, share our story to help other families. The room fell quiet. Public speaking still felt overwhelming for all of us, the wounds too fresh, the healing too fragile. What do you think? Wesley asked gently. Carter spoke first. Will it help find other kids? The organizer thinks so. She said our story proves that hope should never be abandoned, no matter how much time passes. Felix nodded slowly. Then we do it. But together. All 5 of us. All 5 of us, Blake agreed. And I felt the truth of those words settle into my bones. We were a family again, not unchanged by our separation, but stronger for having found each other across impossible odds. Later that evening, after my sons had returned to their respective apartments, they were not ready to live at home again, and I understood why. Wesley and I sat on our porch swing watching the sunset. Do you ever think about all the years we lost? He asked, his arm around my shoulders. Every day, I admitted. But then I think about what we gained. They became good men, Wesley. Despite everything Harper did to them, despite the lies and the manipulation, they grew up to be kind, generous, hard-working men with strong moral compasses. Your boys, he said with a smile. Our boys. They have your stubbornness and your integrity. Harper could not steal that. The truth was more complex than either of us wanted to admit. My sons bore scars that would take years to fully understand. They struggled with trust, with attachment, with the strange reality of having 2 sets of memories that did not quite align. But they also possessed a resilience and empathy that came from surviving the unthinkable. My phone buzzed with a text from Blake. Thanks for the pancakes, Mom. Same time next Sunday? I typed back quickly. Every Sunday for the rest of our lives if you want. His response came immediately. Deal. As the stars began to appear in the darkening Texas sky, I reflected on the lesson that had taken me 30 years to fully understand. Love does not guarantee protection from loss, but it does guarantee that we will never stop fighting to heal what has been broken. Sometimes the very act of refusing to give up becomes its own form of victory. The little boy in green overalls at that neighborhood barbecue had not been my son, but seeing him had awakened something in me that had been dormant for too long. The absolute certainty that my children were still out there, still mine, still waiting to come home. A mother's intuition, I learned, is never truly wrong. It just sometimes takes 3 decades to prove itself right. The strongest love is not the kind that prevents all wounds, but the kind that never stops believing in healing. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that hope is never wasted, even when it takes a lifetime to bear fruit. Have you ever had an intuition that others dismissed but turned out to be true? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes the most impossible things are just miracles waiting for the right moment to unfold.